Thank you. Well, good morning. I'm very happy my family is here. I'm excited to be up here today, and I'm really honored to be sharing this podium with some pretty impressive speakers. It's quite a daunting task to follow somebody like Condoleezza Rice, but I'm going to do my best here. I want to focus on entrepreneurs. The theme of the conference is innovative leaders or innovative leadership. And I really believe that entrepreneurs are the leaders of innovation. So I thought it would be appropriate to talk about them. And I'm going to start right out of the gate with my own entrepreneurial story. And it's a story, to be honest, I've never really told before. And appropriately, it involves our host, Jimmy Blanchard. I'm probably going to embarrass him a little bit because I'm going to brag on him because he's very much the hero of my story. I suspect he's the hero of many stories that he's in. But let me take you all the way back to the beginning of TTV, and it was 2002. And I had just sold, persuaded, convinced a number of people, including Jimmy and Synovus, to get behind a new venture. We were going to start a venture capital firm called TTV that was going to be focused on financial services innovation. And I was loving being in the venture capital business. And I was loving having my own company. And so I was full of pride and excitement and enthusiasm and hope and confidence. But I got blindsided in a way that I did not anticipate. And I got blindsided by a journalist by the name of Bernard Condon, working for Forbes magazine. Anybody in here happens to know Bernard Condon? Please come see me when we're done. I'll pass along a few personal messages you can share with him. But old Bernard decided that he was going to write about TTV, and I was dumbfounded when I heard this because we hadn't done anything yet. I mean, we'd just gotten started, good or bad. So I was like, what on earth does he possibly have to say about TTV at this stage? But he went about writing a very negative, a very condescending, scathing, somewhat factually incorrect hatchet job of an article. And it's silly to me now to say this to you, looking back on it, because it really shouldn't have been that important, but I was devastated. I mean, I was crushed. And the short version of this article was that, for starters, I was way too young and inexperienced to possibly be able to run a venture capital firm. And as I look back on this, I think this probably hurt a bit because I was quite young and inexperienced. I was 32. It didn't mean I wasn't confident and convinced I could do the job, but I definitely was a little bit young and inexperienced. But what really had me upset, what really had me embarrassed, what had me frankly convinced that my career in venture capital was short-lived, was that in this very public forum, millions of copies of Forbes magazines and all over the internet, this journalist declared that Jimmy and Synovus and other investors were crazy to invest money in somebody as young and inexperienced as I was. And Synovus had committed $30 million, and it was a foregone conclusion per this journalist that that was lost money, and that was a dumb idea. And so, despite the fact that, and there are a lot of people from Synovus in here that worked closely with me during this time, and they'll remember these times, and no one ever gave me a signal whatsoever that they were going to pull out of this relationship. But despite that, I had convinced myself that they had no other choice, that I had promised Jimmy we were going to make money and we were going to do some strategic things that were going to be a benefit to Synovus. But I'd also said, this is going to be great for your reputation. And here, right out of the gate, I single-handedly delivered probably the single worst piece of public relations that Synovus had ever received. And I was embarrassed about it. And so I set up a time to go see Jimmy, and I was, trying to be confident and stand up straight and go in there and see him. But I had a heavy heart, and I was convinced that he was going to do it very graciously, but that he was going to let me know that we were going to gradually separate ourselves, because it was the only logical thing for them to do to try to resolve this public humiliation. And so I go into Jimmy's office, and right out of the gate, I realized this was going to be different than I had feared, because it was just business as usual with Jimmy. He was like, how you doing? What you working on? Did I tell you what I saw out at this BIDS conference? And I was like, wow, this is different than what I was thinking was going to happen. And so at this point, I just fessed up. And I said, well, to be totally honest, Jimmy, I'm a little distracted right now. I'm really upset about this article, and I'm really embarrassed. And, I want to know what you think about it. And he said, well, I wish the guy hadn't written it, but at the same time, I don't think he's probably ever built anything in his life. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know me. I'm still believing what we're doing, and I still believe in you. So I'm not really going to think about it anymore. And as a young, inexperienced 32-year-old, I wanted to jump up and down and hug him. But I managed to maintain some semblance of professionalism. And I sat there and I said, you know what, Jimmy? I feel the same way you do. And then I looked at him and I said, well, Jimmy, what do you need me to do? He said, well, I need you to go back to work. And I need you to work hard. And I need you to win. And make me proud. And I tell you, folks, just like that, in the blink of an eye, in an instant, what had been the source of my greatest fear, my greatest concern, my greatest distraction, and greatest embarrassment to date became my largest, greatest motivator, the source of the best inspiration I have had in these last 9 years. And I walked out of that office and I said to myself, I don't care what it takes, how hard I have to work. I'm going to make sure that Jimmy and Synovus are proud. They stood by me when the heat got turned up, when I hadn't delivered anything but promises, and yet here we were with all kinds of public criticism. I stuck that article in my drawers, and my desk is still there today, and it was like rocket fuel for me over the last 9 years. I would hate to admit that to Bernard Condon. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. And as you might imagine, it was the proudest moment of my entire career when earlier this year I was able to send Jimmy an email, and I told him I'd just gotten the 10-year rankings on all venture capital funds that got started in the year 2000, including this fund that we started together that Forbes magazine had declared dead on arrival. And thanks to the fact that we invested in 12 companies that returned over 8 times our money, out of the hundreds of venture funds that got started in 2000, we were ranked #1 in the world for performance. And in addition, there's a firm called Always On that tracks the thousands of private equity firms around the planet, and literally within a week, we got added to the list of the top 100 private equity companies on the planet. And all I can tell you with 100% certainty right now today is that if it hadn't been for Jimmy's principles and values and beliefs, if it hadn't been for Jimmy's desire to win more than he was afraid of failing, if it hadn't been for his positive attitude and for his desire to have some sense of what was going to happen in the future of innovation, banking, and payments, there wouldn't be a TTV today. We wouldn't have been on any rankings, and if we were, we would have been near the bottom. We wouldn't have been on any lists. I certainly wouldn't be in the venture capital business, and I wouldn't be standing here with you today. And so what I learned from that entrepreneurial experience is that if you want to start something, if you want to be an innovator, then you got to do 4 things well. You got to have a strong set of core values and beliefs. You can't be so afraid you might fail that you don't even try in the first place. You definitely have to have a positive attitude. And you do need to have some sense of where things are going in the future. And those are the 4 things I learned from Jimmy, and those are the 4 things I want to talk about now. And I'm going to share some stories of observations I've seen of successful entrepreneurs. Hopefully you've heard of most of them. Let's start with the values, principles, beliefs. It's the perfect one to start with because it really is the foundation of an organization. It can be the foundation of an individual and their leadership and their character. I can't think of any story that better illustrates the power of this than the story of a company called MindSpring Technologies, one of the great stories in Georgia's technology history. And it was started by one of Georgia's great entrepreneurs, Charles Brewer. And I've been fortunate enough to get to know Charles largely because our girls go to school together. But I was really well aware of MindSpring in the 90s, as I suspect many of you were in this room, because they were the dominant internet service provider in Georgia in the 90s. They now go by the name Earthlink. And I assumed, like I think many, that Charles was just some super wizard technology guy who had a vision of where the internet was and where it was going, and so he jumped out there early, and that's why MindSpring was successful. But I promise you, nothing could be further from the truth. As I've gotten to know him and I talked to him, I've learned that Charles was just dissatisfied with corporate America. He was just dissatisfied with the organizations where he'd worked and their core values and their principles and their beliefs. And so Charles wrote a business plan that was nothing more than 9 core values that he wrote down. And they were things like follow the golden rule, we're frugal and treat company resources as we treat our own, we require complete honesty and integrity, all commonsensical things. There's probably one on there that most of us wouldn't have, but it was something along the lines of, business is an important part of life and should be fun. And being a successful business person doesn't mean being stuffy and boring. If you know Charles, it's just like the perfect value for him. But Charles had these values, and he started the company and hired some people and had no idea what business he was going into. I swear to you this is the truth. He has since started 2 other companies, and they've been in real estate, so he had nothing to do with technology. He just happened to be 1994, the internet was going gangbusters, and Charles ended up being one of thousands of people that started an internet service provider. And did it work? What was different about him were the values, and the question is, did it make a difference? And I think the answer is unequivocally yes, because MindSpring was far and away one of the most successful ISPs that ever got set up. They ultimately became the 2nd largest. They always had the lowest churn rate. They had the highest customer satisfaction rate. They were the first to get profitable. They were one of the most profitable. They were one of the first to go public. And they were far and away one of the best investments that anybody could ever make in the internet service provider business. So having a strong set of core values and beliefs can be a very important piece of any entrepreneurial initiative. The second one I want to talk about, and it just sounds easier than it is, I think, but is you can't be so afraid of failing that you don't even try in the first place. And this is a big one because I think there's so many people that just never really step up because in society we have created this stigma with failure. And I think the really great entrepreneurs are able to flip this on its head and change that perception. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Ted Turner. He says all the time that he'll measure the greatness of one of his ideas by how many people hate it. And he's being sincere. And he says, hey, I'm going to start TV shows 5 minutes later than everyone else. And his people are like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But then he goes and he does it, and viewership goes up like 15%. So anyway, I'm fortunate to know another entrepreneur that really taught me something on this subject, and it's a lady named Sarah Blakely who started a company called Spanx. And Sarah had no business background and no apparel background and no hosiery background. She was doing stand-up comedy, and she was selling fax machines door to door. But she'd been cutting the feet out of her pantyhose, and she loved it, and she thought it was a great idea. And she was convinced that the rest of the world needed this. And so she went out and started with her backpack and a little sample. She went around to see retailers and apparel manufacturers and lawyers, and she got laughed at. She got doors shut in her face, and she went months through this. But she was never deterred from what she was trying to do, despite dozens of rejections. And in talking with her about it, I was like, how did you manage to persevere through all of that? She said, you know, I'll tell you a little secret, but I'll give my dad all the credit. He says, when we were growing up, my dad played a game with my brother and me, and every week he had us come sit down at the kitchen table with him and tell him about something that we tried and failed at. He said that I think he was trying to promote them to be adventurous and do new things. But she said, my brother and I just made it into this big competition, and so we literally went out and tried out for everything. And every now and then I was good at something. Like I ended up being a great debater. Had no idea I would be good at debate, but I figured I would try it and mess it up, and I could come tell my dad about it. And so she just was not in any way fazed by rejection and failure because she had learned to view it in a positive way. And I'm not by any means saying go out to fail, but don't be so afraid of trying something that you don't be so afraid of failing that you don't even try it. Because if you're going to be around innovation, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I can assure you 9 out of 10 times it's not going to work. But on that 10th time, it can be quite special. And one last piece on Sarah, I was reminded of when she went to a lawyer's office she wanted to file a patent for a footless pantyhose, and the lawyer thought that he was on Candid Camera or some reality-like show. And he literally was looking around. She didn't know what he was doing. I mean, and he thought the partners had tricked him, meeting with her. And when she realized what happened, rather than being humiliated, she just went down to Barnes & Noble, bought a book on how to file patents, and did it herself. And so that's what I'm talking about not being deterred. You have to have a positive attitude. This is a big one. I couldn't possibly go through this whole speech without talking about my favorite entrepreneur. I wish he was here today. He comes periodically. But, and that's the founder and CEO of the best portfolio company we've ever invested in. It's a guy named Steve Street. And he started a company called Green Dot. And Green Dot does a lot of business with companies here in Columbus and has a lot of roots here in Columbus. But there's a great quote by Winston Churchill that says, a pessimist will find difficulties in every opportunity, and an